From the newsroom to the nursery,
we're juggling a demanding career on live TV with the demands of motherhood.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Karen.
They are Anchor Moms.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Anchor Moms, the podcast. But really, it feels like we should say the first real Anchor Moms podcast post Hurricane Helene here in Western North Carolina. As many of you know, Karen and I work at a TV station. We're just a quick recap here. WLOS TV. We are the ABC affiliate here in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm thinking, unless you live under a rock, you also know that Hurricane Helene has devastated our area. We're like 10 days post-hurricane at this point, I think. Mm-hmm. So we thought we would just come on here and just sort of talk to you about what we're experiencing, what is happening here in Western North Carolina, and then maybe a little bit just how you can help as well.
Yeah, it's, as you can imagine, if you've been following this, been incredibly heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. I think maybe if you're not from this area or haven't been following it super closely, you might not realize just how dire a situation it is for a lot of folks here. So, and we still have a long way to go before recovery can even really honestly begin. I mean, we are 10 days out, but there are still people who
There's still rescue missions going on.
There's still rescue missions happening. There's still people without water. This entire city of Asheville, which is where Katie and I both live, lost water and really power. No cell service, no internet. And slowly some places are starting to get it. But the other caveat in all of this is that the schools cannot operate, as you can imagine, without running water. And so we are also in a childcare dilemma because, all of our children will not be going to school for some time. Some of the surrounding counties are starting back in the next week or two, but Asheville City Public Schools, which is where my children go, probably won't be back for a while. Rivers School will probably not be back for a while.
It's literally a day-by-day situation. The water thing, as Karen said, is the biggest deal. The water lines here in Asheville were decimated.
People keep saying, like, we don't understand why is it so hard to turn the water back on. Entire water facilities, plants were flooded, were destroyed, so much so that there was days before they could even get to the facilities to see what repairs were needed because the roads were washed out. I mean, we are talking just unimaginable devastation and damage to these facilities. And unfortunately, the infrastructure was already not great. And, further complicating things, I think people think of, it's a hurricane. You can respond and repair. But here in the mountains, we do not get hurricanes normally. In Florida and the coast, it's flat. It's a lot easier to get to places. We are in a very, very mountainous area where entire roads, entire communities were washed away. And it is going to be a very long time before those can be rebuilt. And unfortunately, I'm going to just say this, if ever. I mean, there's some areas that just might not ever look the same, which is heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as Karen mentioned, we are both okay. Our families are safe, but there are people who do not have the means. Karen and I are both living in temporary housing, but of course there are people who live in Asheville and Buncombe County, the county that Asheville resides in, who, are literally have been stuck in their home without power or water or service for days at this point. So there's lots of places that are cropping up to offer people food and water and shelter. But it is, for a while there, I was literally taking it hour by hour. Now I can say that now I'm going day by day, but I think there are probably still people here in Western North Carolina who are still trying to figure it all out, who are still trying to take it hour by hour.
And so a tree did fall on Katie's house.
Right.
So you can kind of tell a little bit more about that. But I think that there's a lot, to your point, there's also a lot of folks who had tree damage, who had flooding, who really have no place to go.
Have no place to go. People are in shelters. Yeah.
Yeah. And as Asheville is not unlike many communities across the country right now, we were already in a housing crisis. So it's just very scary to look toward the future and what that means and where these families go. But Katie, you were out of town when this all happened.
We were out of town. Brian and I were trying to do an anniversary trip. And so we were, believe it or not, out of town. And we, River was with our sweet nanny. And we had a house sitter at the house. And she called me in a panic on Friday morning to say a tree just fell into our kitchen. And so if you follow me on social media, you've probably seen some of the pictures. The tree fell into our kitchen, basically essentially destroyed the back half of our house. And then we have, and this is, not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but lots and lots of other huge trees down in our yard, which kind of make recovery a little bit impossible because they're dangerous. The power lines were ripped off our house. So just trying to get through all of that is tough. But so we were able to make it. We were in upstate New York. We were able to make it home. Of course, there was no cell phone coverage, so I could not get a hold of River and our nanny, the family that she was staying with. So it was just I was in a total panic. We ended up flying into the Atlanta airport. We could not get a rental car into Asheville. We ended up borrowing somebody's car. We got home. We got River, so that was happening. And then again, if you follow me on social media, you saw so Karen kindly invited us. Karen and I live almost within walking distance of one another. We live basically in the same little community, and invited us over to have s'mores on that Saturday. So a tree fell on a house on Friday morning. We spent all day trying to clean up on Saturday. And then we went over to her house, and River got on a swing at Karen's house. And she's been practicing her jumps off swings and decided to do it and broke her elbow when she did it. So we spent honestly, that night, we didn't know if it was broken or not. The next day she woke up, it was swollen. So we had to navigate the emergency room here in Asheville when there's no water. The hospital's running on a generator. It felt like everybody and their brother was at the emergency room because, of course, people were not only were they having emergency situations, everybody who was on oxygen or couldn't refrigerate their insulin, they were at the emergency room. So the hospital had no water. We were able to get her diagnosed. She needed surgery. So we made a couple of phone calls, and I'm thankful to say River was able to have surgery on her arm on Wednesday. So as we're recording this, less than a week ago.
Just throw in a broken arm needing surgery in another city
imagine?
On top of a tree on your house.
I've said to a couple of people in the last couple of days, you might not want to spend any time with me because I don't know what can happen to you. We just have had, it just feels like such bad luck. So, I'm
never inviting you to have your kid swing on my swing ever again.
I just will say we did the classic parent thing. We were like, you're fine, shake it off. But I'll tell you, River that night, she knew, she was like, we need to go home. And I probably need to go to the doctor.
Katie said to me that night, there's no way that my kid broke her arm on top of a tree on our house and total destruction throughout Asheville, right?
And we all agreed.
And I was like, no,
right.
There's no way. There's no way. There's no way.
Yeah. And then the worst thing is when I got to Mission and the ER doc looked at her, she was right away oh gosh, she's probably going to have surgery. And I literally remember looking at her
you've got to be kidding.
What? Wait. It's not bad enough that my house is destroyed, my kid has a broken arm, but also she's going to need to have surgery.
And because we don't have running water in Asheville, you have to go to another city.
We cannot do the surgery here in Asheville. So I feel incredibly lucky. We were able to get the surgery. River is on the mend, and we are staying in some temporary housing at an Airbnb that someone gifted us kindly, and we are at the end of this week looking to possibly rent a different place a little bit closer to the station.
But you will be without your real home for a while.
Right. We're still trying to navigate what all of that, how much structural damage was done to our house. obviously we're like looking at a renovation, but at this point we're just trying to like just get electricity back to our house. Does that make sense? So that we could potentially do something. We don't know. Everything is literally, I've never had such an experience in my life in which I don't have a single answer to anything. Like, when will your kid go back to school? I don't know. Like, when will you be able to live in your house again? I don't know. River had like a dentist appointment this week. Like, when will River ever go back to the dentist? I don't know. Like, it's just, there's like not a single thing in my life that is concrete and answerable right now.
Yeah. And I think for most of us, a lot of families in our area, because of the school situation, if you can work remotely or go live with grandparents and enroll your kids elsewhere, are doing that. We're seeing a lot of families leave. I've heard a lot of families talking about, are they going to come back? I think there's a fear that Asheville will never be the same again. And I think that's a very terrible but honest reality that we might be facing. I think one thing that was tricky from the get-go before Helene hit was Asheville grew at an exponential rate, right? We just became this very big, booming tourist city. And so the infrastructure already was lagging. And now this has just really taken out what we did have.
I'm hoping, I hope that people stick around and help rebuild. But I don't blame you if right now you can't do it. Karen and I were talking, aside from like the people who work at this station, almost every other 30 to 40 something I know with kids has left town. Because like it's like impossible to like, you can't live without water or electricity
or school.
School. Yeah. Long term. Karen, share your story. Say what you were doing during all of this.
So Katie was in New York. So I was filling in that morning in her normal role, anchoring the morning show with Charles. And it was very clear that it was going to be really catastrophic, and it was really hard to express the urgency in which we wanted people to take these warnings and evacuations seriously. When you're in a breaking news situation like that, you're getting all of these updates from different counties, from different emergency officials. It's so hard to keep up with them and get all that information out as quickly as possible. The other hard thing was, even by that point, I think my house lost power at 4 a.m. and I think most people's did. So even by the time we're on air at 4:30 and the storm is hitting, it hit around 8 or 9 a.m. that morning, people have already lost power. So you are kind of, unfortunately, no one can hear
watch you.
No one can watch you. No one knows what's going on, which is incredibly frustrating because you are there with the information that you need to save people's lives, and people weren't getting it. So we were, it was tough. As Katie mentioned, basically, I don't think people might realize the entire city of Asheville lost all cell service. I didn't even know this was like a setting on your phone, but your phone just has SOS and you can't make any sort of calls out, texts out. So I couldn't get a hold of my family either. I'd gotten one text before the storm hit from my husband saying we're okay. But then, of course, I knew that Katie had texted that a tree had fallen on her house. I'm calling neighbors, and, you just couldn't get through to anybody. And you don't, of course, want to assume the worst, but you know what's happening all around you. And it was really hard because I was so worried about them. It was, it was tough. After I think it was 8.5 hours, we finally kind of signed off and had a shift change, and the other folks came into the newsroom, and I was able to get home. I will never forget driving home. I mean, even as I came off the desk, and the other thing that was really terrible about this is the interstates were closed in almost every single direction. So people couldn't come in and out of Asheville for several days. We couldn't get resources in. We were landlocked, and no one knew if I could even get to my house. So I just, of course, you just have to go towards your family. So I just drove, and I will never forget driving on the interstate to my house, and there weren't a lot of cars out. it was literally all I could think was, this is the opening scene of Walking Dead. It was like
Yeah.
literally apocalyptic. There was so many trees down on the interstate. You're just swerving in and out from down trees on the interstate, you know. It was unbelievable. You're driving under trees being held up by power lines, which you're not supposed to do, but it was terrifying. But anyway, I made it home and my family's fine. Everybody was fine. And we hunkered down and stayed, like Katie did, in our house with no power, no water, nothing for a couple of days, and then realized that with 4 little kids and it being a long way off, we needed to get to somewhere else. So we were fortunate to go stay with friends for a couple of days, and then we switched to another house with other friends in upstate South Carolina. So it's about an hour and change from work. But I think for Katie and I, we're dealing with this storm on a personal level, and we're also dealing with it from a journalistic level, trying to cover this, and it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, you know.
And we're lucky. Our families are safe. We're fine. I mean, Katie's obviously has to rebuild her house. And has a lot of that going on too, but we were saying to a coworker this morning, you know, we have all of our loved ones and we'll be okay, but there's so many families who lost people, and the death toll unfortunately is still rising here in Western North Carolina, and it's just really tough.
Yeah. Right, like you know, from a journalism perspective, like a work perspective, it's like you can't escape it, right? Like yesterday I'm going to my house, like we keep having to go back to our destroyed house to like get things, to rep up things, to meet insurance agents. River is like terrified of going back. She has zero interest in going back into the house. I'm not even sure that she fully she keeps talking to me about like, when are we going to put our Halloween decorations up?
Yeah.
Like she got a doll over the weekend and she's like, wants her to play with the dollhouse that is currently in our garage that was in our flooded basement. And it's like you're trying to manage all of that, and then you have to come to work and still somehow be professional and tell people stories. And it's really, you know, it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the days when we saw you guys at your house post the storm. I mean, that was the only fortunate thing. Like Katie and I have great neighbors, which is wonderful, good friends near us. And so we were all kind of those first couple of days, no cell service, but like literally leaving notes on people's doors and like, come by my house if you can.
It was like 1865 again. Yeah. Like we were, you know, I would go over to Karen and Greg's house and they wouldn't be home. And I would just like walk in, call for them. And then I would walk back outside and your neighbors would be like, you looking for Karen and Greg? And I'd be like,
they tried to go to the old church to get cell service. Like,
yeah, they're at the old abandoned church up the road getting cell service.
I heard there might be some Wi-Fi.
Right. I was like, I left them a note. And then it's funny, like we went back to our house and you guys were at our house, like you were at our neighbor's house. So it's just,
but
we made it work. Yeah.
But I was just going to say, during that time, we, you know, poor River has this broken arm, and she wanted to show Bennett something in her room. So Bennett and Sam went in her room, and they, you know, love River's room, and then so they're playing whatever, which, you know, those are like yes, kids play, like be normal for 5 minutes amongst all of this destruction. But then when we were leaving, Bennett said, I mean, I really want to do a sleepover at River's house. Like when can I sleep over at River's house? And I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. Did you see the tree through their kitchen? Like it's going to be a minute before you can do. And she's like, I don't understand. I love her room. Her room is fine. Can I just sleep over at her house? And I mean, you know, which is good that they maybe are not fully grasping the entire situation. You know, I will say though, my kids are, I mean, I don't know. You have no idea how this is going to affect them. They talk a lot about, you know, they've heard the news when it's been on.
I mean, there's no way to avoid it. I mean, I just don't, like everywhere you go, people are talking about this. I just
Mhm.
think from like a kid perspective, I don't know how you avoid it. And I've been trying to shield River, but I'll be honest with you. She saw the tree. She saw the destruction.
Mhm.
She saw Mission Hospital. It was like, I mean, as soon as we walked into that emergency room, I started crying because it was just so
Yeah.
scary. And she was
Mhm.
like, Mom, stop crying. Like, stop crying. Because I
Mhm.
think it scares her. But it's like, I just
Sure.
don't know how to,
I know.
you know, I
It's
just
hard.
don't know. I don't know. I don't know what like the answer. If you're a therapist out there, send us, I'm
Yeah.
serious, like send us some good advice because it is just hard to figure out. You know, for the first couple of days, River was really quiet. She did not complain about her broken arm. Even before it was set, she did not complain about her broken arm. And that sort of freaked me out.
Mhm.
Like when
Mhm.
you would ask her at the, you know, in the emergency room, they'd be like, how big is your pain? She would be like, medium. But like she has 3 pins in her arm,
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
bad.
And it's just weird. I just like, I don't like, it's like, are you okay in
Mhm.
there?
Mhm.
I think she
Yeah.
is.
I know. Well, that's the thing. And we don't know, right? Like, we don't know how much this is going to impact our kids. You know, they're at different
Yeah.
ages. I mean, little 2-year-old Sam every day is like, is there going to be another storm?
I
Are we
know.
safe? Are we safe? You know, and we were fine. You know, we didn't even have a tree in our
Yeah.
house. But I think they're just so aware of what's going on. We keep moving to different people's houses.
I
You
know.
know, there's no sense of normalcy. So yeah, and then on top of all of that, you know, it's just and if you're not in TV news, you know, I'm sure you're not aware of how newsrooms respond to this, but in a crisis disaster like this, it is unbelievable to see how you know, so many different levels. We've had crews come from other cities who at first couldn't even get to us. They were trying to like drive through back roads to come get to us and help. It is like an all hands on deck. People are working unbelievable shifts, weekends, nights, long hours.
I mean, people are sleeping in here. Some of the morning producers slept here for a week
A
because
week.
they were
Yeah. Couldn't get home.
their apartments were destroyed.
Mhm.
And so they just slept here.
And still, I mean, 10 days out, a lot of people don't have power.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or water. Yeah.
water. Yeah, just this morning. I mean, fortunately, we do have showers here at work. I mean, it is like a steady line of people coming into work early, showering just to get a hot shower
Mhm.
before they start their shift. And you know, the other thing too is we should point out we're not obviously alone. The linemen, the emergency crews.
No.
I mean,
They're working. They still have to work.
one of the emergency officials we've been talking to a lot told me last week, I get to go home for the first time and sleep in my
Mhm.
bed in like 11 days. I don't know, because he had started even before the storm with the preparations, and there was a rain event, unfortunately, right before Helene hit, which complicated everything. But yeah, it's a really it's just you know, it's one of those situations where it's so tragic and so unbelievably sad, but at the same time we are seeing so many people really turning out to help. The response, I mean, I know Katie and I both, like, from friends, from family, where can we donate? What do you need? What can we send you? Is just really unbelievable. I've been so impressed with our kids' school. Their teachers have been messaging, can we, you know, if your kids want to FaceTime just to like have a familiar face for a minute.
So nice. Yeah.
You know, let us know who needs what. You know, there's people wanting to donate. Like, please let us know what you need. So I think amidst all of that, that's the silver lining, right? Is that we see people really coming out. And even on Friday, I was out reporting in the field, and the number of people you meet who say, well, we had some trees down and some damage, but like nothing compared to these people. And we just wanted to get out there and help and are bringing water to whoever we can. And we heard maybe there's some people trapped in this neighborhood, so we're bringing supplies and, you know, anything people can do to help. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying that the Airbnb that we are staying in right now, we are currently staying in, was Brian's coworker had texted him. She was supposed to get married last weekend, and so had this Airbnb. Her parents were staying there, and she was like, you know, obviously the wedding is canceled. Take this Airbnb. Can you imagine your wedding gets canceled days before your destination wedding and you are
Mhm.
thinking about reaching out to somebody else. I
Yeah.
can't. You know what I mean? Like, I think I would just be so annoyed and
Mhm.
angry and disappointed. Like, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm gonna tell you, that's like how I feel. Like, I'm so like sometimes it's like hard for me to be totally honest, like to think about like others because I'm starting to feel a little bit better. But like, those first couple of days, like all you can think about is like, what the heck are we gonna do?
Mhm.
Like literally,
Mhm.
what are we gonna do? I'm not thinking about my neighbors. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not thinking about helping other people. I'm literally like, what are we going to do? And so the fact that, I mean, and this Airbnb is just like an example of one example of the ways that I've seen people who like some people don't have anything and they're
Mhm.
still giving back to other people. So yeah, I don't know. If you have I've never experienced, I'm from Western Pennsylvania. This landscape is very similar to Western North Carolina. I have never ever experienced a natural disaster like this. I've never just like, and honestly, now that I have, it's like I said to a friend, it's like there will now be a before Helene and after Helene. You
Mhm.
know how like after you have kids, you're like, when people ask you like, well, when was that? You think to yourself, okay, that was, oh, I didn't have River. So it was like before River. So it was like this date. Like this is how Helene
I
is
mean,
going to be
it's
here.
going to be like
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, post-pandemic,
Right.
pre-Helene, post-Helene.
Right. It is
Yeah.
life changing. And I just don't
Mhm.
think you can prepare. Like I never anticipated this. It just was not
Mhm.
on. And I mean,
No one did. Yeah.
this is like, was not the broken arm. All of this was just not, it just wasn't, I just didn't know. I just didn't see it coming,
Mhm. Yeah. I think can wrap up.
I think we
right?
can wrap
And,
up. I mean, we could go on and on,
yeah.
but listen, there's lots of time to talk about this. We're going to post some links to donate
Yeah.
if you would like.
That's one thing I wanted to say that, yeah, I mean, we have so many people who are really going to be feeling the effects of this for a long time. One woman I talked to last week said, I'm so nervous for November 1st. And I hadn't really thought about that, but she was saying all the people who have not been able to work, who live paycheck to paycheck and still have to pay rent, perhaps in a damaged home or an unlivable home or
Yeah.
whatever your situation is. She said that's when, it's just it's going to get unfortunately worse before it gets better. And there's going to be a lot of people really struggling. So as Katie said earlier, we will list, if you're wanting our opinion, we can list some places to donate and to send help here locally. But also I would just say if you have a trusted organization that you like to donate to who helps in situations like this, please do so. And I can assure you we need it.
Yeah. Yes. So stay tuned, right? Like this is, we're going to podcast about the recovery efforts, what it's like to be a parent and a mom and a working journalist when we're trying to, recover from this, watch our city recover and our community recover, and then our families as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hope everyone's doing okay. If you're listening from Asheville, we're with you.
We're with you. We are with you. Like we are with you.
And we'll try to see you again next week.
Yeah. Bye, guys. Anchor Moms is a Sinclair podcast produced out of WLOS in Asheville. We're your hosts, Katie Killen and Karen Zakalak. Anchor Moms is edited by Matthew Yates.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode and to stay up to date on future episodes, follow us on Instagram @AnchorMoms.
You can follow Anchor Moms on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Know a parent who could benefit from this week's Anchor Moms episode? Your recommendations help our show to grow, so spread the word.